At a Sunday dinner in late October, my son-in-law's father grabbed my 8-year-old grandson by the collar, lifted him off his feet, and slammed him against the dining room wall hard enough to crack the drywall. My daughter-in-law's mother smiled and said, "Good, that boy needs to learn." My grandson cried so hard he couldn't breathe. I stood up, walked to the kitchen, and made one phone call. They thought I was just a tired old man with arthritis and a small pension. They had no idea who they were really sitting across from. Before I tell you what happened next, take a second to subscribe to Frost Vengeance, and let me know in the comments where you're listening from tonight. I read every single one. I'm 68 years old. My name doesn't matter much for this story. What matters is that I spent 31 years as a federal forensic accountant for the Department of Justice, working white-collar crime out of the field office in Hartford, Connecticut. I retired in 2022 with 2 commendations from the FBI director and a Rolodex full of names that, even 5 years later, still pick up when I call. But to my son Tobias, to his wife Marigold, and especially to her parents, I was just the quiet old man from Wethersfield who shopped at Stop and Shop on Tuesdays and drove a 14-year-old Buick. I hadn't seen my grandson August in almost 5 months when the invitation came. It was October 17th, Friday, and I was raking leaves in the front yard when my phone buzzed. The text was from Marigold, my daughter-in-law, not from Tobias. "Family dinner Sunday at our place. 4 p.m. August has been asking about you." That was it. No warmth, just functional words, like she was placing an order. I read it 3 times standing there in the cold with my rake. August had been asking about me. I felt something tighten in my chest that I hadn't let myself feel in months. The boy was the only grandchild I had. His birthday in August had come and gone, and I hadn't been invited. I'd mailed him a card with 2 crisp $50 bills inside and a hand-drawn picture of a fishing boat, because the last time I'd seen him, back in May, he'd told me he wanted to learn to fish like the kids in his picture books. The card came back 2 weeks later, marked "Return to Sender" in Marigold's handwriting. I never told Tobias. "Some things you swallow." I texted back, "I'll be there. Should I bring anything?" She didn't respond. Sunday came with a cold gray New England sky, the kind where the air smells like wood smoke and something is always about to rain, but never does. I drove the 40 minutes to their place in Glastonbury. They lived in one of those new developments on the east side, all beige siding and 3-car garages, paid for, I knew, by Marigold's father, a man named Quentin Vexley. Vexley owned a chain of luxury car dealerships across central Connecticut. 3 locations. He liked everyone to know about all 3. I parked my Buick at the curb because their driveway was already full. It was Marigold's BMW, Tobias's old Subaru, Quentin's Range Rover, and Quentin's wife Pernilla's white Mercedes. I sat in my car for a minute and looked at all those clean, expensive vehicles and at my dusty brown sedan, and I almost laughed, because 30 years ago I'd helped put a man in federal prison for buying cars exactly like Quentin's with money he'd skimmed from a pension fund. The world has a strange sense of humor sometimes. Marigold opened the door wearing an apron over a cashmere sweater. She gave me a smile that didn't meet her eyes. "Oh, you're early." I was 4 minutes early. "I can wait in the car," I said. No, come in take your shoes off." The house smelled like rosemary and money. I padded into the living room in my socks and saw August sitting on the carpet with a coloring book. The moment he looked up and saw me, his whole face changed. He dropped the crayon and ran across the room and threw his arms around my legs. "Grandpa, you came! You came!" I knelt down, my knees popping like firecrackers, and I pulled him close. He smelled like apple shampoo and crayon wax, and little boy. He was thinner than I remembered. His hair was longer. There was a small bruise on his forearm, yellowing at the edges, the kind that's a week or 2 old. "Of course I came, buddy. Of course I came." Tobias appeared in the kitchen doorway. My son. He was 36 years old, tall and lean. But he stood like a man who was always apologizing for taking up space. His shoulders had a curve to them now that hadn't been there 2 years ago. He gave me a small wave. Hey, Dad. Hey, son. That was all we got out before Quentin Bexley walked into the room. He was a big man, 6'2", broad in the chest, with a thick silver mustache and a face permanently flushed from either alcohol or pride or both. He was holding a tumbler of bourbon at 3 in the afternoon. His wife Pernilla followed him, a small, sharp woman with helmet-stiff blonde hair and a string of pearls she rotated between her fingers like a rosary made of judgment. "Well, well," Quentin said, looking me up and down. "Look who decided to show up. Tobias, get your father a drink. He looks like he could use one." "I'm fine, thank you," I said. Quentin sat down in the armchair, the good armchair, the one Tobias had bought when he and Marigold first moved in. "Heard you finally retired. What was it again? Some kind of office work for the government?" "Accounting," I said. "Accounting." He drew the word out like it tasted funny. "Bean counting. Pushing pencils." "Well, hey, somebody's got to do it." He winked at Pernilla. "Me, I built something. 3 locations. 42 employees. You ever wonder what it would have been like to actually build something, Tobias?" Tobias stared at the carpet. "Dinner's almost ready," Marigold called from the kitchen brightly. Like nothing was happening. We sat down at the dining room table. August was placed between his mother and his grandmother Pernilla. I was placed at the end, the seat closest to the door. Quentin sat at the head. Tobias was on my left. Marigold brought out a roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans almondine. It looked like a magazine spread. It tasted like sawdust to me, but I chewed and swallowed and said all the right things. "Tobias, how's the warehouse going?" Quentin asked. My son worked logistics for a regional distributor. It was a steady job, decent pay, full benefits. He'd been there 9 years. "It's going fine, Quentin." "Fine, fine." Quentin stabbed a piece of chicken. "You know, I keep telling Marigold, your husband could be making 3 times what he makes now if he'd just come work for me. Sales, closing deals, real money." "I'm not really a sales guy," Tobias said quietly. "You're not a man yet, is what you're not." Quentin laughed at his own joke. Pernilla laughed too. Marigold looked down at her plate and smiled. I kept eating. "You know what your problem is, son," Quentin said. "Your father raised you soft. No offense. But look at him, sitting there like a church mouse. Probably never raised his voice in his life. That's how you end up with a kid who can't close a deal." "Quentin," Pernilla said gently, "be nice." But she was smiling. I cut my chicken. I chewed. I watched. August was kicking his feet under the table, the way little boys do. He bumped the table leg and Quentin's bourbon glass wobbled. A drop, just one drop, sloshed over the rim and onto the white tablecloth. Quentin's face changed. "What did I tell you about kicking?" August froze. "Sorry, Grandpa Quent. Sorry, sorry. Sorry doesn't fix anything. Come here." "Quentin," Tobias said, and there was something in his voice, a tiny crack of resistance. "He didn't mean to. I'm talking to my grandson. Come here, August." August looked at his mother. Marigold looked at her plate. He slid out of his chair and walked around the table. His shoulders were already up by his ears. I'd seen grown men walk that way into interrogation rooms. An 8-year-old shouldn't know how to walk that way. What happened next took maybe 4 seconds. Quentin grabbed August by the collar of his little blue sweater. He stood up, and he lifted that boy clean off the floor. August's feet kicked the air. And then Quentin took 2 steps and slammed him into the dining room wall. There was a thump, and then a crack, and then a small high sound that came out of August like a balloon losing air. "You don't kick at the table," Quentin said. "You don't kick at FI table." He let go. August slid down the wall and crumpled onto the floor, and he started to cry, the deep kind of crying where a child can't catch his breath, where his whole body shakes. Pernilla, from her chair, calmly cut another piece of chicken. "Good. He needs to learn. You let that boy run wild, Marigold." Marigold said, "I know, Mom. I know. Thank you, Daddy." Tobias was halfway out of his chair, his face white, his hands shaking. He looked at his wife. He looked at her father. He looked at her father. He looked at the floor where his son was lying. And then, God help me, he sat back down. He sat back down, and he picked up his fork. I have replayed that moment 1,000 times. I do not blame my son. I have come to understand what years of that house had done to him, but in that moment the only thing keeping me in my chair was the realization that if I moved wrong, if I said the wrong word, August would pay for it later, when I wasn't there. So I set down my fork. I folded my napkin. I stood up. And I said very calmly, "Excuse me, I need to use the restroom." Quentin waved me off. He was sitting back down, settling into his chair like a king after a coronation. "Down the hall on the left, old-timer. Try not to fall in." I walked down the hall. I went into the bathroom. I closed the door, locked it, and I sat on the edge of the tub and took out my phone, and I called a number I hadn't dialed in 3 years. Connecticut State Police, Major Crimes, Lieutenant Brockhurst speaking. "Vance, it's me." There was a half-second pause, and then his voice changed completely. "Boss, is that you? I need a unit at 47 Ashbrook Lane in Glastonbury. I'm a witness to the felony assault of a minor. The child is approximately 8 years old. The perpetrator is an adult male, 6'2", 220, intoxicated. The boy was thrown against a wall hard enough to damage the drywall. He's still on the floor. The mother and grandmother are present, and one of them just thanked the assailant. I'm in the home now. I'm not in danger, but the child needs medical evaluation." Jesus Christ, we're rolling. Address again. I gave it to him. "Boss, are you recording?" "Audio only since I came into the bathroom. But I have a clear sight line to the dining room from the hallway corner. I'll get video for the rest. Stay on the line as long as you can. ETA 6 minutes. Vance. One more thing. The grandfather in this scenario is named Quentin Vexley. He owns Vexley Auto Group. I want a courtesy call to the Glastonbury PD chief and to ADA Hollenbeck if she's reachable. This is going to get loud." "Already on it, sir." I hung up. I splashed water on my face. I looked at myself in the mirror, an old man with thin gray hair and tired eyes. And I thought, I'm sorry, August. I'm so sorry I let it get this far. Then I opened my phone's camera, started recording video, and walked back to the dining room with the phone held casually at my hip. August was back in his chair. His eyes were red and swollen, and he was eating green beans one at a time, mechanically, the way you do when you've learned that finishing your plate is the price of being left alone. There was a red mark on the side of his face, and his sweater was stretched out at the collar. "Everything come out all right," Quentin said, and laughed. "Everything's fine," I said. I sat down. I picked up my fork. I started recording. "So Tobias," Quentin said, leaning back. "As I was saying, sales. Real money. Tell him, Marigold. Tobias, Daddy's offering you a real opportunity. You should be grateful. And what about August hockey? I thought we were signing him up." "Hockey's expensive, Tobias," Marigold said. "Maybe if you took Daddy's offer." "I'd put the boy in football," Quentin said. "Hockey's for rich kids and Canadians. Football'll toughen him up. God knows somebody needs to. You raise a boy too soft, he ends up like his old man." He pointed his fork at Tobias. "No offense, son." I kept the camera angled. I kept eating. "What do you think, Grandpa?" Marigold said suddenly, turning to me with that bright, dead smile. "About football for August?" I chewed slowly, swallowed, took a sip of water. "I think," I said carefully, "that whatever August wants to play, he should play. He's a smart boy." "Smart doesn't pay the bills," Quentin said. "Tough does. Tough closes deals." "Right, Pernilla." "That's right, sweetheart." The doorbell rang. Marigold frowned. "Who in the world? We're not expecting anybody." "Probably some Jehovah's Witness," Quentin said. "Tell him to get lost." She got up, smoothing her apron. I heard the front door open. I heard her sharp inhale. I heard a man's voice say, "Ma'am, we're with the Connecticut State Police. We received a call regarding an injured minor at this residence. We need to come inside." "There's no injured minor here. This is a family dinner. Ma'am, please step aside." Two state troopers came through the front hallway. Behind them was Lieutenant Vance Brockhurst, 55, gray at the temples, who had been a young deputy sheriff in Hartford County 26 years ago when I'd helped him build his first major financial fraud case. Behind him was a Glastonbury PD officer and a paramedic with a bag. Quentin half stood. "What the hell is this?" Vance walked into the dining room. His eyes scanned everyone. They landed on August. His face hardened. "Son," he said gently, kneeling down. "I'm Vance. I'm a police officer. I'm going to have my friend here take a look at you, all right? Just to make sure you're okay." The paramedic crouched down. August looked at his mother. His mother, for the first time, looked frightened. "This is harassment," Quentin said, his voice booming. "This is private property. You can't just walk in here. I'll have your badge." "Sir, please sit down," the Glastonbury officer said. "Do you know who I am?" Vance straightened up. He looked at Quentin. Then he looked at me. The smallest nod passed between us, and I saw his face register something deeper than recognition. It was something close to relief. The kind of look a junior officer gives a senior officer when the cavalry has arrived. He'd been the junior once. "Mr. Vexley," Vance said evenly, "we're here in response to a call from a witness in this home reporting a felony assault on a minor. I'd like you to remain seated." "Witness? What witness?" Vance turned to me. "Sir, can you confirm what you reported on the phone?" I set my fork down. I wiped my mouth with the napkin. I looked at Quentin Vexley across the table. "My name is Wendell Kofer," I said. "I'm August's paternal grandfather. Approximately 22 minutes ago, in this dining room, I personally observed Mr. Vexley grab the child by the collar, lift him off the floor, and throw him against that wall." I pointed. There was a small dent and a hairline crack visible in the drywall. The child was unable to breathe normally for approximately 40 seconds afterward. Mrs. Vexley audibly approved of the action. My daughter-in-law thanked her father. The child has visible marks consistent with the impact, and I have video of the verbal context that followed. Quentin's face had gone from red to purple to a kind of waxy gray. You called the cops? At MY dinner?" "You were at your daughter's dinner, sir," Vance said, "and it's not your call to make. And who the hell are you to walk in here and take his word over mine, my word, against some shriveled-up little pencil pusher?" Vance's jaw tightened. "Mr. Vexley," he said, "this man is Wendell Kofer. He served 31 years as a senior forensic accountant with the Department of Justice. He testified in over 200 federal cases. He helped train me when I was 26 years old. When he calls and tells me what he just saw, I believe him before he finishes the first sentence." The room went very quiet. Marigold was looking at me as if she'd never seen me before in her life. Pernilla had stopped fingering her pearls. Tobias was staring at me, and his mouth was slightly open, and I saw something in his eyes that I had not seen in a long, long time. It looked like a child waking up. The paramedic stood up from August. "Sir, I'd like to take this little guy to the ER for x-rays. He's got tenderness along the upper spine, and his pupils are slightly uneven. Could be nothing, could be something." "He's fine," Marigold snapped. "Don't touch him. He doesn't need a hospital." "Ma'am," Vance said, "with respect, that decision is not yours alone right now. The father is also present." Tobias looked up. His hands were on the table, palms flat, like he was steadying himself against an earthquake. He stood up slowly. "Take him," he said. His voice was hoarse. "Take my son to the hospital. I'll ride with him." "Tobias." Marigold's voice cracked. "Don't you dare." "You laughed, Marigold." "What?" When your father threw our son into the wall, you said thank you to your father. Tobias. I'd take him to the hospital, Tobias said to the paramedic. I'm coming. The paramedic gathered August up, wrapped a small foil blanket around his shoulders, and walked him out. As he passed me, August reached out and touched my hand. Grandpa, he whispered. Are you coming? I'll be right behind you, buddy, I promise. Quentin Bexley was arrested in his daughter's dining room at 5:37 p.m. on a Sunday in October. He was charged with risk of injury to a minor under Connecticut General Statute 53-21, a Class C felony, and with assault in the third degree. They cuffed him at the table. He was still wearing his napkin, tucked into his collar. Pernilla was not arrested that night, but she was given a stern lecture about Connecticut's mandatory reporting laws, and informed that she would be receiving a follow-up call from the Department of Children and Families. Marigold sat at the dining room table after they left, and she cried. She cried very loud. I did not stay to comfort her. I drove to Hartford Hospital, and I sat in the waiting room with my son. August had a hairline fracture of the C2 vertebrae, a high cervical fracture, the kind of injury that, with a different angle, with a fraction more force, leaves an 8-year-old in a wheelchair forever. Or worse. When the doctor told us, Tobias put his head in his hands and made a sound I had never heard a grown man make. I put my arm around my son's shoulders. He was shaking. Dad, he said into his hands. Dad. I sat there and I picked up my fork. I know, son. I just sat there. Tobias, listen to me. You got him out tonight. That's what matters now. You got him out tonight. That's what matters now. You got him out. He cried for a long time, 40 minutes maybe. I just held on to him, my grown son, 36 years old, crying like a boy. When he could finally speak, he said, Dad, who are you? I sat back in the plastic hospital chair. I thought about how to answer. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. The vending machine in the corner hummed. I'm your father, I said. That's what I am. Everything else is just a job I used to have. But Lieutenant Brockhurst said. He said I helped train him. That's true. He said I worked white-collar crime for the DOJ. That's true, too. I retired 3 years ago. I never told you because I never wanted you to introduce me at parties as my dad, the federal agent. I wanted to be your dad, the boring guy in the brown Buick. He laughed then, a wet, broken laugh. You're not boring. I'm pretty boring, son. Why didn't you tell me when Quentin started in on you? When he called you a pencil pusher? You could have shut him up in 5 seconds. I thought about how to answer that too. Because, Tobias, people show you exactly who they are when they think you don't matter. Quentin's been showing me who he is for 3 years, and every time he did, I was filing it. I was making a record. I was waiting. For what? For tonight, I guess. I just didn't know it would be tonight. He was quiet for a while. Dad, I have to ask you something. Anything. Marigold. The thing she said. The thank you, Daddy. I can't unhear that. I know. What do I do? I took a deep breath. Son, that's not for me to decide, but I will tell you this. The state is going to file charges against Quentin. The Department of Children and Families is going to open a file. You and Marigold are going to be looked at very closely. You need to decide right now whose side you're on. Hers, or that little boy's, because you cannot be on both. He didn't answer right away. He was looking at the door of the pediatric ward. His, he finally said. His side. Always his side. From now on. Then we start there. The next morning, I called an attorney named Ophira Ruckholt. Ophira had been a deputy chief in the U.S. Attorney's Office in New Haven. She'd retired the same year I did, and gone into private family law practice in West Hartford because, as she put it, I'm done with cartels. Now I just want to ruin custody battles for bad people. Ophira was 4'11" and weighed about 100 pounds, and was the most terrifying litigator I had ever seen in a courtroom. "Wendell," she said when I told her the story, "I will eat that woman for breakfast. Bring me the case file by Wednesday." Then I called an old colleague named Bernard Stoltzman, who had spent 20 years auditing automotive dealerships for the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. "Bernie, how busy are you?" "For you. Never." "What do you got?" "Vexley Auto Group. 3 locations. Connecticut. The owner's name is Quentin Vexley. I want to know if the books are clean." A long pause. "Wendell, are we doing what I think we're doing?" "Bernie, I'm not asking you to do anything. I'm asking you, as a private citizen who I have known for 28 years, whether or not you happen to know if a particular business has any irregularities that you, in your professional judgment, might consider to be in the public interest." He laughed. "You haven't lost a step. Give me 4 days. Take 5. I'm not in a rush." I wasn't in a rush because I knew, from 31 years of doing this work, that men like Quentin Vexley do not run clean businesses. Men who casually throw their grandchildren the walls do not pay their taxes correctly. Men who treat people like that on Sunday afternoons do not file accurate quarterly statements. There is a tax to being a bully, and the IRS eventually comes to collect. 3 days later, August came home from the hospital wearing a soft cervical collar. He was going to be fine. The fracture was stable, no surgery required, 6 weeks in the brace, and then physical therapy. He came home to my house in Wethersfield, because that's where Tobias was now staying. Marigold had refused to leave the Glastonbury house. She had also refused to visit her son in the hospital. She had hired an attorney, a man from Stamford named Hollander, who was already filing motions about parental alienation. Hollander didn't know yet that he was about to meet Ophira Ruckold. The first week, August barely talked. He would sit on my couch with my old golden retriever, Biscuit, and stare at cartoons without laughing. He flinched at loud noises. He had a nightmare every single night, and would crawl into Tobias's bed at 3 a.m. I bought him a fishing pole, a real one, and put it in the corner of the living room where he could see it. I told him as soon as the doctor said it was okay, we'd go up to my brother's cabin in Vermont and catch a trout. The first time I saw August smile again was the night he asked me, "Grandpa, were you really like a spy?" "No, buddy, I wasn't a spy. I was an accountant. But Daddy said you put bad guys in jail." I helped, sometimes. There were a lot of people who helped. I just looked at numbers. Numbers are kind of boring. Numbers are very boring, August. That's why bad guys think nobody's watching. He thought about that for a while. And then he said very seriously, "I think I want to be an accountant." I laughed so hard I cried. 2 weeks later, Bernie Stoltzman called me back. "Wendell, sit down." "I'm sitting." Vexley Auto Group has been running a curb-standing operation across all 3 locations for at least 6 years. They're buying salvage and flood title vehicles out of state, washing the titles through a Shell LLC registered in Delaware, and reselling them as clean used cars. I count at least $1.4 million in unreported income, probable wire fraud, and almost certainly mail fraud given the financing paperwork. There's also a pattern of structured cash deposits that screams Bank Secrecy Act violations. Bernie. That's beautiful. There's more. The Shell LLC, the registered agent is Pernilla Vexley, the wife. She's all over the paperwork. She's not just an accessory, Wendell. She's a co-principal. I took a slow breath. Bernie, I think a concerned citizen, perhaps an anonymous one, might want to file a formal tip with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division and maybe a parallel complaint with the Connecticut Department of Motor Vehicles. And possibly, just possibly, a heads-up to a friend at the State Attorney General's Consumer Protection Division. Wendell, you magnificent old bastard. Bernie, I'm just an old man on a pension. Right. I'll have the documentation packages ready by Friday. I hung up. I sat on my back porch in the cold November air. Biscuit came and put his head on my knee. Inside, I could hear August laughing at something on TV. Tobias was on the phone with Ophira, discussing a motion for emergency temporary custody. I want you to understand something. I was not happy that day. I was not gleeful. I was not enjoying it. I have never enjoyed this part of the work. What I felt was a kind of cold, settled certainty. The same way you feel when you finally fix a leak in the roof that's been bothering you for months. You don't celebrate. You just stop hearing the drip. The criminal case against Quentin moved quickly because the evidence was overwhelming. My phone video, the medical records, the cracked drywall photographed by the responding officers, August's eventual videotaped interview with a child forensic specialist, Quentin's attorney, a high-priced defense lawyer out of Hartford, tried for a plea. The state's attorney refused. They wanted trial. They wanted a public conviction. In the meantime, 6 weeks after the dinner, Quentin Vexley received a registered letter from the IRS Criminal Investigation Division informing him that Vexley Auto Group was the subject of a criminal tax investigation. 3 days after that, he received a second letter from the Connecticut DMV, suspending the dealer licenses of all 3 locations pending review. 2 days after that, his floor plan financing was pulled by the bank because dealer license suspensions void the loan covenanters. In the span of 1 week, Quentin Vexley went from being a man who was out on bail awaiting trial to being a man whose entire business empire was frozen, his bank accounts under scrutiny, and his wife under separate criminal investigation. He did not understand what was happening. His attorney did not understand what was happening. Quentin called Tobias at one point screaming that, "Your fucking father did this to me." And Tobias quietly said, "I don't think he did anything, Quentin. I think you did anything, Quentin. I think you did," and hung up. Marigold filed for divorce in early December, or rather, she filed divorce papers as a tactical maneuver, expecting Tobias to fold. Hollander expected a sleepy, uncontested split with Marigold getting the house and primary custody. Instead, he got Ophira Ruckold. She filed a counter-petition the same afternoon with 37 exhibits attached, including the medical records, the police report, the DCF preliminary findings, and 3 sworn statements from neighbors describing past incidents of yelling and slammed doors at the Glastonbury house. By Christmas, Tobias had emergency temporary custody. By February, he had full custody with supervised visitation only for Marigold, and only after she completed a court-ordered family violence counseling program. She did not complete it. Marigold, it turned out, did not handle being the small one in the room. The criminal trial of Quentin Vexley began on March 9th. Tobias did not attend. He stayed home with August. I attended every day. I sat in the 3rd row behind the prosecutor's table in a clean blue suit I'd bought specifically for the occasion. Quentin saw me on the first day and looked away. He did not look at me again. Pernilla had taken a separate plea deal on the financial charges in exchange for her testimony in the assault case. She testified on the record that her husband had been drinking heavily that day, that he had a history of, in her words, exuberant disciplinary style with the grandchild, and that she had been afraid to intervene. Her face on the stand was a mask of well-rehearsed regret. She was, of course, lying about the fear, but it didn't matter. The video did the rest. The jury was out for 2 hours and 11 minutes. Guilty on all counts. The judge, a stern woman named Maribel Yarrow, gave Quentin Vexley 5 years in state prison with a mandatory minimum of 3 to be served before parole eligibility. She gave a speech from the bench that I will remember for the rest of my life. She said, "Mr. Bexley, this court has presided over many cases. Some involve adults harming each other in moments of conflict. Those are tragedies. This case is something different. This case involves a grown man, 3 times the size and 10 times the strength of an 8-year-old child, picking up that child like an object and throwing him against a wall hard enough to fracture his neck, and then sitting down to finish his dinner. This court finds your conduct not merely criminal, but contemptible. The maximum sentence is, in my view, insufficient. But it is what the statute provides." Quentin was sentenced. He was led out in handcuffs. He did not look at me. He did not look at anyone. In the hallway afterward, Ada Coraline Hollenbeck shook my hand. She was about 45, small and sharp-eyed, and she had handled the case personally. Mr. Kofer, she said, it was an honor. The honor was mine, counselor. You did the work. You did the work, sir. We just put it in front of the jury. I went home that night, and August was waiting for me on the front porch with Biscuit. He had finally graduated out of the cervical collar 2 weeks earlier. He ran out into the driveway when I got out of the car. Grandpa, what happened? I picked him up. My back protested. My knees popped. I didn't care. He's going away for a long time, buddy. He's not going to hurt anyone for a long, long time. Forever? Long enough. Long enough that by the time he gets out, you'll be tall enough that he wouldn't dare. He thought about that. Grandpa, are we going fishing now? Yeah, buddy. Now we go fishing. We did go fishing the following weekend up at my brother's cabin on Lake Caspian in Vermont. August caught a 14-inch brook trout, the biggest fish of his short life. He held it up for the picture, and his grin took up his entire face. He was missing one of his front teeth by then. I have that picture framed on my mantel to this day. In the spring, Marigold tried to come back. She showed up at my house, unannounced, on a Saturday in May. She was thinner. Her hair was different. She had been, I learned later, in some kind of treatment program her mother had paid for. Wendell, she said, on my front porch, can I come in? No, I said, please. I just want to apologize. To Tobias. To August. Marigold. They're not here. They're at a soccer game. Then can I apologize to you? I looked at her for a long moment. I thought about the fishing card I'd drawn for August's birthday. I thought about her writing return to sender on it. I thought about her saying, thank you, Daddy. You can say what you came to say, I told her. I'll listen. I won't promise anything beyond that. She cried then. She told me she was sorry. She told me she had grown up afraid of her father, and she had spent her whole adult life trying to please him, because she didn't know any other way to be. She told me she had been so jealous of how Tobias loved his quiet, unimpressive, brown Buick driving father that she had needed to make Tobias small. Because if Tobias was small, then her father was big, and big was the only kind of love she understood. I listened. I did not interrupt. When she was done, she stood there waiting for me to say something. I said, Marigold, I appreciate that you came. I think you may even mean it. But you are not entitled to my forgiveness, and you are not entitled to my sons, and you are absolutely not entitled to my sons, and you are absolutely not entitled to August's. If you want a relationship with that boy, you will earn it the way the court has laid out. Step by step. Visit by supervised visit. With counseling. With time. You don't get to apologize your way back in. You have to walk your way back in, and the walk takes years, and it might not work. She nodded, wiping her face. Will you tell Tobias I came? I will tell him. Will you tell him I'm sorry? I will tell him you said so. She turned to go. At the bottom of the porch steps, she stopped. Wendell, did you do it? The IRS thing? My father's business? I looked at her. Marigold, your father committed years of fraud. The federal government noticed. That has nothing to do with me. She stared at me a long moment. Then she nodded slowly and walked back to her car. I never told her the truth. I will tell you the truth. I made 2 phone calls. That was all. I made 2 phone calls to 2 old friends, and I told them what I'd personally seen, and I asked them what, in their professional judgment, they thought a concerned citizen should do. Everything that happened after that was the system working exactly the way the system is designed to work. Quentin Vexley destroyed himself. I just made sure the right people were watching. That is the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge is a private satisfaction. Justice is a public reckoning. Revenge requires you to dirty your hands. Justice requires only that you not look away. I am 68 years old, I have lived in this house in Wethersfield for 31 years. I drive a 14-year-old Buick. I shop at Stop and Shop on Tuesdays. My grandson lives with me and his father most weekends now, because the school is closer to Tobias's apartment. But August likes my big yard and Biscuit and the workshop in the basement where I'm teaching him to whittle. He is 10 years old now. 2 years have passed since that Sunday dinner. He sleeps through the night. He laughs out loud at cartoons. He has a best friend named Theo, and they ride bikes together, and they play hockey, not football, because August asked his father if he could play hockey, and his father said yes. Sometimes late in the evening after August is asleep, Tobias and I sit on my back porch, and we don't say anything. We just listen to the crickets. And one night last fall, he reached over and put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, "Dad, thank you for everything, for all the years you didn't tell me, for the night you did." I didn't say anything back. I just put my hand over his. People are going to look at you your whole life and decide what you are, based on the car you drive and the way you wear your sweater and how loud you talk at dinner. Let them decide. Let them be wrong. The ones who matter will figure it out eventually, and the ones who don't matter will never know, and that's fine. That's exactly fine. I am the boring man in the brown Buick. I am also the man who made the call. If you stayed with me to the end of this story, I want you to know I'm grateful. Hit the like button if it meant something to you, and subscribe to Frost Vengeance so the next one finds you. Tell me in the comments where you were listening from tonight. And tell me, if you want, about the quiet person in your own family that nobody ever quite saw coming. I'll be reading. Take care of each other out there, especially the small ones. I've thought about that Sunday in October 1,000 times since it happened, and what stays with me most is not the violence. It is the silence that came before. For 3 years I sat across from Quentin Vexley while he insulted my son, while he diminished my grandson, while he drank too much bourbon at 3 in the afternoon and called me a pencil pusher in my own family's house. And every single time, I made a choice not to respond. People have asked me since, was that weakness? Was that cowardice? No, it was something I learned in 31 years of looking at numbers on paper. The loudest man in the room is almost always the most afraid. Cause and effect. A man who needs to dominate everyone around him is a man who does not believe he can be loved without it. And a man like that, given enough time, will always reveal who he really is. What I want you to take from this story is not that I am clever, or that I had connections, or that the system worked because I knew the right phone numbers. The truth is, the system would have worked anyway. Anyone in that dining room could have made the call. The hardest part was not knowing who to call. The hardest part was being willing to stand up at the table while my own son sat frozen beside me. That is the part that takes courage. And courage is not something you are born with. It is something you build, quietly, over decades, every time you choose to do the small right thing when nobody is watching. I think a lot now about the difference between strength and noise. Quentin had noise. He had a big voice and a big truck and a big house and 3 dealerships with his name on the sign. But when the moment came, when his life actually got tested, he had nothing. No real friends came forward for him. No employees stood up for his character. His own wife testified against him. Noise is not strength. Strength is the quiet record you build of being a decent person, the quiet competence you build at your craft, and the quiet relationships you build with people who would still pick up the phone for you 20 years after you retired. I think about my son Tobias every day. He is rebuilding. He is 40 pounds lighter than he was a year ago. He laughs out loud now. He plays catch with August in the yard. The hardest thing for him to forgive, he told me once, is not what Quentin did. It is the moment he himself sat back down and picked up his fork. I told him what I will tell you. The measure of a man is not whether he freezes once. It is whether he gets up the next time. Take care of the small ones. Tell the quiet people in your life that you see them. And when the moment comes, do not look away.